Hi, welcome to Interview Speak, what your interviewer really wants to know. We're going to be talking about chapter 3 in our book. There are 13 chapters. If you missed the two chapters, you can go back and take a look at those. And we suggest you do that before you jump into chapter 3. Let's talk about what we're going to cover in this video. Right now, we're in part 2 of our book, which is translations, where we show you what the interviewers are asking and then help you to translate so you really understand what they're asking so you can give your best answer. And in chapter 3, we talk about interpersonal skills questions, approachability, influencing, conflict management. So, who are we? We're Barbara Limmer and Laura Brown, and we want to help you have the best interviews possible so you can get the job you want. So, let's jump in with the translations. And first, let's go through the question that you might get answered. I'll show you the translation and then how to answer it. So, one question you could get asked, is give an example of an initiative you led that required you to interact with various levels within the company. So let's talk about what they're really asking for. So the interviewer really wants to know about what you do because they need somebody who can quickly establish themselves as credible with a management team. And also, he'll be approachable and respected by entry level staff. So, what you want to do is give an example of a time when you demonstrated that ability. This brings us back to preparation. So, in preparation, you're going to think about a story you can use. So, how to answer? Start with an example that shows how you established new relationships and built trust and credibility with management. And then think about what did you do to actually build trust? Describe what you said, how you interacted, and maybe how you overcame any doubts that others may have had about you. And then describe what you said and what you did with lower level staff to build the trust there, to show respect to them and encourage interaction. Again, this goes back to preparing yourself with some good stories so when you get asked questions like this, you're ready.
The next question is give an example of a time when you convinced leadership in your organization to make a significant change. So, this is about influencing others. And if you notice that sort of thing on the job description as you're preparing to interview, you've got to have a story ready. So, let's break down this question. And here's an example of what we have in our book. We call it a sentence diagram to sort of translate the different words and what they really mean in this question. So, give me an example of a time when you convinced. What do we mean by convinced? Well, it means that you used your skills to influence, persuade, and or negotiate in order to gain acceptance of your idea. It also says convinced leadership. What does that mean? Well, people in more senior roles than you. It could be your manager or a group of managers. It doesn't necessarily mean the C-suite or the top executives in your company. It's people who are more senior than you. So you convinced leadership in your organization to make a significant change. Now, don't get hung up on the word significant. I've had a number of clients get overwhelmed by that and they think it has to be something huge. It doesn't. It doesn't have to be something huge, but it does refer to something that was perceived to be important or meaningful. So, significant change. What do they mean by change? Well, it could be any kind of organizational policy, practice, process, or system. So, again, you have to have a story ready, convincing leadership to make a significant change. So, the translation of this question is we're looking to hire a change agent, but our leadership team sometimes is resistant to change. Show me you'll be able to convince them of needed changes. And by the way, I've had a number of clients get hired because of this. They're hired because the company needs changes. And then they get on board and they face all sorts of resistance and they end up being sort of taken aback like, wait a minute, you hired me to bring about change and now you're not wanting me to change anything. So we really want you to think back on how you overcame that natural resistance and be able to demonstrate that you can convince people of changes that are needed. So, how do you answer this question? Well, describe a situation where you had an idea that you knew would result in a major improvement. Explain what the objections were and what you did or said to overcome them. Talk through your involvement in the implementation of the idea and, of course, the results. Now, I want to mention something about this question because sometimes people get so caught up in describing the change and the results of that change that they skip that middle bullet, which is really the heart of this question. What were the objections and what did you do or say to overcome them? So that middle part is critical. So here's another question. Describe a time when you successfully diffused a conflict. Let's break that down. So successfully, what is meant by that? Well, you were able to get to a resolution where all parties walked away satisfied. Even if compromise was needed, they all walked away satisfied. That's what we mean by successfully. Diffused means that you reduce the tension between the parties involved. And conflict, again, doesn't have to be a huge knockdown, drag out conflict. It means any kind of disagreement or clash between two or more parties or people, most likely due to differing priorities or agendas. Okay, the translation of this question, describe a time when you successfully diffused a conflict, translates to conflicts may arise from time to time, so we need someone who can resolve them rather than make them worse. Give an example of when you did just that. So, how to answer it? Well, you do need to come up with a situation that required you to mediate or collaborate with either two people or two groups that were having some sort of conflict or disagreement. And again, if when you're looking at the job description as part of your preparation, you notice anything about conflict resolution or mediation, collaboration, be ready. You might get a question like this. So you've got your situation ready. What you need to talk through is how you used your ability to ask questions in order to get at the root of the conflict, demonstrating your listening skills and your ability to influence others in order to reach a compromise. Provide the context, what made it challenging, what questions you asked, what the responses were, and what you said to diffuse the emotions and reach a resolution that satisfied both parties.
Those were some key ideas from chapter number 3. Let's talk about what's next. In chapter number 4, we're going to talk about questions that involve perseverance skills, failures, and something that we all get nervous about, negative situation questions. So we're going to be talking about questions that have failures and criticism, overcoming obstacles in difficult situations, perseverance, and drive. How do you keep going? Thank you so much for joining us today. Please like and share this, and don't forget you can get a discount on the book at thepublishermanning.com using code InterviewHelp. We'll see you at the next video. Bye.